Mini has finally solved their biggest problem, and for years, people have been complaining they're too small, too cramped, and too impractical for daily life. Well, mission accomplished. This new Cooper S is bigger, more spacious, and infinitely more usable. But here's what Mini didn't tell you in their press releases. Fixing that one massive problem created 3 brand new ones that could fundamentally change your relationship with this car. And honestly, one of them could be a deal breaker depending on what you want from your Mini Cooper S 4-door. What's it like? Buckle up, my friends. Let's go for a drive. I'm your host, Brian Makse, racer, lover of driving fast, fun things. And on this channel, you get reviews for drivers from drivers. Now, those 3 things, well, they don't become obvious until you drive this thing. One becomes obvious as soon as you turn a corner in this thing. The second appears when you try to have fun with the gearbox. And the third, well, that actually happens when you write the check. But Mini's solution to the space problem has fundamentally changed what it means to drive a Cooper S, and I'm not sure that's necessarily a bad thing. And before we get into what this is like to drive, let's have a look at it in a little more depth. For 2025, we know that this Mini Cooper is all new, and it's the most significant redesign since the all-new Mini. The chassis is significantly more rigid than before. This 4-door is 6.3 inches longer than the 2-door, with a 2.83-inch increase in wheelbase. And for this 4-door, interior space is dramatically improved. Rear seat legroom and cargo capacity have also increased. Under the hood is that 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo, makes 201 horsepower from 5,000 to 6,500 RPM and 221 pounds of torque from 1,450 to 4,500 RPM. And those numbers are up 12 horsepower and 14 pounds of torque from the previous generation. There's a 7-speed dual clutch automatic. It is front-wheel drive with an open differential, although there is brake-based torque vectoring. Steering's electrically assisted. McPherson struts at the front, multi-link at the rear. Adaptive dampers are optional, as this one is equipped. Wheels and tires are 17s or 18s. This one is fitted with the optional 18s. Curb weight is 3,089 pounds, which is about 150 pounds heavier than the previous generation. And static weight distribution is 61% front, 39% rear. But on this channel, we know it's not static weight distribution that counts, it's how you use it. Did you know that 80% of you are not subscribed? Yes, it's true. 80% of you are not subscribed. I checked the data. So if you like the content on this channel, do me a solid, hit that subscribe button, make sure you like this, and if you want to support the channel, please hit up our merch store. Links here, links below. Lots of great stuff for driving enthusiasts like us, including our very popular line of Save the Manuals merch. Now back to your regularly scheduled episode. Behind the wheel, the fundamentals are spot on. I've got a great relationship here to the Mini. Seating position is top-notch, and these JCW seats, I think, are a worthwhile option. Lots of lateral support, very comfortable over long distances, but the basics are right on. I've got a great relationship to the steering wheel and to the pedals, and I'm seated nice and low in the chassis. Just can't get any better. And Mini, now being part of the BMW group, well, they never get that wrong. The steering wheel is interesting. It's the right shape and the right size to have your hands at 9 and 3. Definitely encourages that. But this third spoke is kind of like a nylon fabric, and it's a nice, cool touch. But the rim thickness, well, it's like an M+ kind of rim thickness, that's for sure. But it all works very well when you're behind the wheel, whether you're just cruising or when you're having fun in the corners. After that, this experience in the cabin is dominated by the big OLED screen and the heads-up display. What I like about this setup is the heads-up display gives me all of the essentials that I'm looking for, but then the turn signal indicators are actually here on the top of the OLED screen. Not necessarily a fan of that. I'd like that to be integrated into the heads-up display. That makes a lot more sense to me, but I suppose that is part of Mini's quirky kind of ergonomics, and of course, we still have toggle switches for much of the fundamentals. Also, in terms of spaciousness, the whole experience is a little unique, and it is unique to Mini. We do have a wireless phone charger right here, and it's got an elasticized strap to keep your phone in place. Love that. Couple of cup holders here, But my favorite bit in all of these new Minis is this little cubby, and I have found this to be extremely, extremely usable. What that also means is that this armrest is solely an armrest. There's no storage in here whatsoever. In the second row, I can actually fit behind myself in this seating position, and kudos to the lengthened wheelbase here, and there's just enough room where I would be comfortable. The rear seat probably good for 2 adult passengers over moderate distances. I would not go on a cross-country road trip with 4 adults in this thing, let alone have to deal with all the cargo carrying issues that problem presents. But speaking of which, there's much more space under the hatch of this 4-door than any of the new 2-door Coopers, whether that's a Cooper S or the JCW. There's a lot more usable space under that hatch now, and that is very, very helpful. Of course, the rear seats split and fold so you can carry larger items in your mini 4-door. The increase in space in that rear seat is transformational. We've gone from yoga flexibility required to actual adults can fit. I'm 5'10" on a good day, and I can actually sit behind myself in the seating position without my knees becoming intimate with my chin. The 60/40 split folding seats turn the cargo area from weekend bag only to IKEA run survivor. It's like watching a studio apartment suddenly become a 1-bedroom. The square footage didn't really change, but day-to-day usability definitely did. This OLED screen isn't just a screen. I think it's Mini's declaration of war against Tesla and their tape a big tablet to the dash approach. Thing is, OLED means perfect blacks, infinite contrast, and colors so vivid they make reality look dull. But here's what's brilliant. Instead of just making it bigger like everyone else, Mini made it better. The interface responds like your phone, not just like a rental car GPS from 2012. And it might be proof that when you can't compete on size, you compete on quality. Kinda like when the best restaurants have very small menus. The interior design here is very premium. Everything you touch feels fantastic, but I think their philosophy here is much about everything you need and nothing you don't, which kind of sounds like a Marie Kondo book. The bar with all the toggle switches puts the important functions at your fingertips. The steering wheel controls are intuitive, and the seat position is so naturally perfect you forget you're adjusting to the car instead of it adjusting to you. It's the opposite of a lot of modern luxury cars that make you feel like you're programming a VCR from the 1980s just to change the radio station. Visibility is excellent in all directions, except for maybe out the back, because from this perspective, it looks like that rear window is about the size of a smartphone screen. One thing I will say about this UI is the way Apple CarPlay is rendered here. It looks like a bit of a square peg in a round hole, but otherwise, this display is stunning. It is responsive, but I just love a little bit more natural approach to the whole UI thing with these modern Minis. That's because I'm still not accustomed to this, despite having driven a whole bunch of these new 2025 Minis, and it seems like I'm learning the UI every single time I drive one. But fun fact, this OLED screen uses the same tech as modern high-end televisions, which means you're carrying around a $2,000 display just to adjust your climate controls. And yes, the toggle switches are still here, and getting rid of those would be like McDonald's discontinuing fries. Sure, it's technically possible, but why risk a riot? And of course, for the purposes of science, we need to launch this thing, so let's give it a shot, shall we? Wow, that torque build is real. Lots of torque here. Wow. And it is relatively quick. I mean, this is not a JCW. This is just Cooper S, 200-ish horsepower. And apparently it'll do 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, which is quick enough, but it probably isn't a pure indication of how quick this is in the real world, because the torque is readily available in the operating range where you are day to day. It is very, very responsive, as is the transmission, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Top speed is supposed to be 150 miles an hour, but I think with 3,000 pounds and a little over 200 horsepower, it's going to take a very long time to get there. But I will say that this Mini is quite happy cruising at highway speeds. You can tell that BMW engineered this for the Autobahn because it's very, very happy to cruise along at high speeds. One of the things about this Cooper S is that because it's so well-rounded and so much fun in every way, the lack of shift paddles for the dual clutch is a glaring omission. And sure, the dual clutch is actually very good, and in a lot of ways, especially in day-to-day driving, it's like having a good personal assistant. It anticipates what you want before you know you want it. Upshifts are quick, downshifts come with perfect rev matching, but the trade-off is you lose that mechanical connection that made old Minis feel special. It's supremely efficient and objectively better than any manual they could offer, but efficiency isn't always what enthusiasts are chasing. It's technically superior and infinitely more convenient, but something does get lost in the translation. And I would love some shift paddles, and I would certainly love a manual in these new 2025 Minis. A 201 horsepower doesn't sound like a lot, but then you consider the curb weight is just over 3,000 pounds, and then you remember that this power to weight ratio is better than a Porsche 911 from the mid-2000s. The beauty isn't in the peak numbers, it's in how that power gets delivered. The torque hits early and stays consistent all the way through the rev range, so you're not waiting for the engine to wake up or worrying about falling off a power cliff. The reality is it's accessible performance. It kind of makes every corner exit feel like a minor victory instead of a negotiation with mechanical systems. The more I drive this 2-liter turbo, the more I think that it's got the personality of a caffeinated accountant. It's efficient, trustworthy, and surprisingly energetic when it needs to be. The torque curve is basically flat from 1,500 to 4,500 RPM, which means it pulls consistently instead of having that old school turbo sneeze then violence delivery. It's maybe not the most charismatic 4-cylinder Mini or BMW have ever done, but it might be the most usable. Think of it as the automotive equivalent of a Swiss Army knife. We know this is front-wheel drive with an open diff, and we're reminded that it's front-wheel drive every once in a while when you're asking for maximum acceleration. You get a little tug at the steering wheel, but the way they've sorted out the geometry and the brake-based torque vectoring, you don't miss a limited slip diff here in day-to-day driving. Dynamically, this is a very competent package. You've got great steering, great brakes, and a great suspension to support whatever you want to do in the corners. Keep in mind, it is a Cooper S, not a JCW, but dynamically, it is very well rounded. The steering is fantastic in a lot of ways, except in terms of feel or feedback. Thankfully, there's a tremendous amount of feel you get from the chassis, but from the steering itself, well, not all that much. And what I do find with this steering is that it's overly assisted just a little bit for my liking, but then again, I have to remember this is a Cooper S, not a JCW. The steering has some weight to it that naturally builds. Turn-in is immediate, and it's not twitchy by any stretch of the imagination, and the car tracks perfectly through every corner exactly where you point it. And in a lot of ways, it's the kind of steering system that makes you take the long way home just to take a few extra corners. Chassis balance is what happens when engineers realize that making a car's wheelbase longer doesn't have to make it boring. Yes, this 4-door is a lot longer than the 2-door, but the wheelbase stretch is perfectly proportioned, and the weight distribution remains relatively neutral for a front driver. Steering's responsive mid-corner balance is predictable, if on the benign side. I'm not going to say that it understeers because it doesn't. And exit traction is manageable even with 221 pounds of torque going through those front wheels. And overall, it feels like a properly sorted front driver, not a compromised one. This tester has the optional adaptive dampers, and every time I drive one of these with this option, it's very clear that this is a mandatory option. The dampers are very, very good here. Sure, there are McPherson struts at the front, a multi-link setup at the rear, and it manages to be sporting without being punishing, and I think a lot of the credit goes to those dampers. It's still compliant without having any of that secondary movement you'd get with softer dampers. Over broken pavement, it filters out the harsh impacts while keeping you informed about surface changes. Then through the corners, body and wheel control is excellent. This thing stays relatively flat and composed even when you're being enthusiastic about cornering G's. It's like the dynamics engineers found this wonderful sweet spot right between a sporting suspension and day-to-day comfort and set up camp there. One of the dynamic highlights for me is the braking in this Cooper S. Brakes are fantastic, and it starts with a wonderful brake pedal. I've got precise control, lots of power, and for me, I can control the attitude of this Cooper S on corner entry. And for someone who has a lot of front-wheel drive racing experience, it all starts with the brake pedal, and this brake pedal is absolutely perfect here. Time to find some corners, I say, shall we? Let's. And here is exactly where I'd like some shift paddles, but the dual clutch is anticipating what I'm looking for just by my inputs. Very impressive. And turn in response, excellent. Oh, these brakes, wow, they're so good. Exiting the corner, no trouble putting down all that torque. Wow. I do think in the corners, this Cooper S is happiest, that's for sure. Tough corner coming up here. Little throttle in on the brakes, turn in, off the brakes. Now this is off camber on the exit. How are we gonna do? Wow, really well done. You can feel a little tug of the steering wheel as those tires struggle to put down all of that power, but really all comes together in the corners. At its limits, and I did test this on my handling loop, I will say that chassis balance is not as sharp as I'd like in a front-wheel drive car, but that also makes it less approachable for other drivers, because what you have to do is get this car to rotate, which means stiffer suspension settings at the rear so that you can rotate this a little bit easier. You can still rotate it on throttle mid-corner, and that's just fine, but overall balance is pretty benign. I wouldn't say this has a huge tendency to push, because on this channel we know cars don't understeer by themselves. It's the nut behind the wheel that makes them do that. That makes me wonder, though, whether there's a JCW version with a suspension setup that's a little bit more pointy, but that's another question for another day. But overall, handling balance and ride quality is top-notch, and for 99.9% of Mini Cooper S drivers, they're going to be very happy with the dynamic package as well as ride quality, and that I can't complain about. This Mini succeeds because it finally answers the question, what if Mini made a Cooper that people could actually live with on a daily basis? The result here is the most complete Mini Cooper ever built. It's spacious enough for real people, refined enough for daily use, and still interesting enough to make mundane drives feel special. It's not the purest Mini, but it's the best Cooper for 2025. If you can accept sometimes growing up means compromising on some ideals to gain actual livability, this Cooper S represents Mini's successful transition from quirky fashion statement to legitimate premium compact car. I don't think any of those issues are deal breakers for anyone's. They're solving different problems for the realities and priorities of driving in 2025. How do you spec yours? Well, I have some thoughts. What you are looking at is a 2025 Mini Cooper S 4-door in British Racing Green 4 Metallic with the Vexen Nightshade Blue interior. Now, keep in mind, US and Canadian product planning is a little bit different, but this is extremely well equipped, including the adaptive dampers, advanced driver assist, JCW seats, the Harman Kardon audio system. Base price in the US is $33,200, and as tested, this is $36,400. In Canada, base price is $40,990, and as tested, this is $48,290, and these prices are before freight, taxes, fees, etc. For similar money, you could get a loaded Mazda 3 Turbo with all-wheel drive, a base Audi A3, or a well-equipped Subaru WRX, but none of them give you this Mini's combination of style, heritage, and I made an interesting choice factor. And in a world of increasingly homogenized cars, you're paying a little bit more here for a whole lot of personality. In that context, well, that personality is becoming a lot more valuable. Now, in terms of speccing yours, there is one mandatory, and that is the adaptive dampers. Every time I drive one of these new Minis with the adaptive dampers, it's very clear that that option is worth every single penny. So no matter how you spec your Mini Cooper S 4-door, definitely get the adaptive dampers. And before you get all excited about ordering your Mini Cooper S 4-door, here's what you won't learn from a brochure or a dealer visit. This is straight from the owner forums after 6 months of real-world use. First, the paddle shifter situation. The Cooper S comes with no paddles at all, unless, of course, you get a JCW, but that's not a Cooper S. Owners have discovered a secret: start the car, put the gear lever in drive, then hold it there for 20 seconds. The steering wheel rocker buttons magically become shift paddles. Even Mini dealers don't even know this trick, but unfortunately it doesn't stay in memory. Second, those missing exhaust tips, that's not a mistake. Mini deliberately hid them to make the gas car look like the electric version. It's called desportification by owners who feel robbed of this visual drama. Third, that beautiful OLED screen, real-world boot times, according to owners, is 3 to 5 seconds, and it occasionally black screens, they say. What that means, sometimes your climate controls are frozen on cold mornings, literally. The workaround is holding both steering wheel scroll buttons for 15 seconds to force a reboot, and changing fan speeds requires digging through 2 menu layers, and owners are programming "Hey Mini, fan speed 3" into their speech memory. But here's the thing, owners are getting 45 plus miles per gallon on highway trips, way better than EPA estimates, but they're also dealing with brake pads that create excessive wheel dust. And owners are saying the Vexen synthetic leather feels premium but scuffs faster than real leather. Look, this is still a fantastic car, but those are some of the things that owners have discovered living with this Mini Cooper S long after the test drive. My verdict, well, Mini did resolve the space issue, and it's brilliant because it's all very usable. But those 3 new issues, the weight gain, the mandatory dual clutch, and the premium pricing, they're real, but they're manageable. The extra weight is only noticeable in direct comparison to older Minis. The dual clutch is actually better in day-to-day driving than any manual for most people in 2025. And the pricing, well, it's a bit high, but it reflects the car's genuine premium positioning. These aren't problems that ruin the experience. They're trade-offs that come with modern expectations for refinement, efficiency, and daily usability. And sometimes the cost of progress is losing what made the original so special, but at the same time, gaining things that make modern driving much more enjoyable. Thanks for hanging out with me today and having a look at this 2025 Mini Cooper S 4-door. Hope you liked this episode, and if you did, you're not new, you know what to do. Smash the subscribe button, turn on your notifications, like this, and as always, sharing is caring, so please share this with your friends, especially on Reddit, because on Reddit, they really need to see reviews for drivers from drivers. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And if you want to support the channel, please hit up our merch store. Links here, links below. Lots of great stuff for driving enthusiasts like us, including our very popular line of Save the Manuals merch, and boy, does this thing ever need a manual. Anyway, thanks again for watching. We'll see you again next time, and remember, cars don't understeer by themselves, not even Mini Cooper S's. And since you've hung around this long, have a look at something new from Mini for 2025, the JCW. And that was a blast to drive, and I think you'll like that episode. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you again next time.